Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Waffle Press Retrospective. I'm your host, Diego Crespo. With me, as always, is Matt Garingo. Matt Garingo.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, bit awkward this.
How did you get out there?
Fire escape.
It's 20 stories.
Your doorman's intimidating.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Parker.
Not much to tell, really.
Peter lives with his aunt and uncle.
Did you catch that spider guy yet?
No, but we will. This guy wears a mask like an outlaw.
I think he's trying to do something maybe the police can't.
Can't?
this is where is Matt? Do you know? I don't know.
I'm not sure, but I kind of look a little bit like him. Just don't think too much about the British accent, and it will go well.
Okay. You know what? I feel like there's potential here. This is different, but I feel like we can get something out of this together. Uh, who are you? What is your name?
Well, my name is Jack, but I mean it's one syllable. It's a one syllable name, so we can still go with it still. But anyone who's a big fan of Matt might be a little bit disappointed, but you stuck with me for this episode at least.
I'd like to welcome Jack Godwin to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on. Oh, many years ago, we discussed Guardians of the Galaxy on the Waffle Press. We are still going to talk about The Amazing Spider-Man, a film that is a little divisive. Jack, really quick, what would people know you from online? What you doing?
I've just started up a new Spider-Man podcast on Spider-Man the animated series. It's called That 90s Spider-Man Show. And yeah, we'll link to all that and everything. But yeah, we're going through that show, so I'm deep into the Spider-Man media, the comics, the movies, the everything.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'll put links down, of course, below. And now we can jump right into the movie because you and I are both big Spider-Man fans, obviously.
Uh-huh.
Maybe not so much of all the movies. In fact, we might talk about one of them right now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, 2012's The Amazing Spider-Man, directed by Marc Webb, written by, who wrote this? James Vanderbilt. Alvin Sargent did a draft, but I think that was mostly just rewritten by James Vanderbilt and
Right.
Steve Kloves. This is the reboot that was in production side by side with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4. Wow, the development of Spider-Man 4 started almost immediately after the divisive, I guess we'll say, Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
Did not really leave a good taste in everyone's mouth. I actually don't know. Are you a fan of Spider-Man 3?
I'm one of those people who's kind of come around to it as time's gone on. I definitely hated it when it came out, but I think over time I've started to see a few good qualities in there alongside the clear flaws.
Yeah, that's where I am too. Like, I actually would go as far to say I even love it. But
Yeah.
there are huge issues with that film, and I get people not being crazy about it. I don't get some other reactions to some of the other movies.
Yeah.
But
Well, I'll say up front, I'm a huge fan of the Raimi movies in general. I rewatched the first one a few weeks back, and I'm pretty sure it's my favorite one.
it's it's not a like a take that I'll be like I'll fight you over. It's just that Spider-Man 2 is so good
Yeah,
for me, you know. But the first Spider-Man is also kind of like the perfect launch pad for the
yeah,
Spider-Man character on film. Like, what do you even do after that?
yeah. I think. Well, the thing is, I've rewatched Spider-Man the first one more recently than Spider-Man 2. So again, I feel like I need to go through all these movies again, as you guys are, because I feel like each time I rewatch them, I'm changing my opinion just a little bit.
Yeah, it's a mileage may vary kind of trilogy, I think. Because I've even heard some takes. I didn't really talk about this in the Spider-Man 3 episode. I've heard some people say that the first two might not be their cup of tea, but that three is actually their sweet spot. And
Really?
yeah, that one fascinates me. I find that really interesting. What people are drawn to with the Spider-Man character. And what I think they're drawn to the most is the likability of the characters and the wackiness of like the
Right.
Sam Raimi tone uh, that's kind of inherent to the Spider-Man character. There's a lot of horror elements with his villains, a lot of body horror. I find really
Mm.
interesting. Maybe something about that. I don't know. I find it really fascinating. What I don't find fascinating is the production history of the Amazing Spider-Man. So after Sam Raimi couldn't get Spider-Man 4 off the ground, he tasked many screenwriters and many scripts uh, to get a story working that involved John Malkovich as the Vulture potentially, Anne Hathaway as a character named the Vultress, who would have been Felicia Hardy, but then I guess that was debunked recently for the first time that she
That's
would have in fact played Black Cat. I'm very confused about that.
yeah, that's really strange because you bring in Anne Hathaway before you say anything else. My first thought is Black Cat, and and then to make her Felicia Hardy, and then not make her Black Cat. That's a really bizarre choice, if there ever was one.
Yeah, I trust in Raimi more than anything, but I think just the production toils of Spider-Man 3 kind of had taken their toll, and everyone was like, we can't get this working. And Raimi described it as like an amicable breakup, where if they
Right.
couldn't do right by Spider-Man, he would rather not make the film. And I have to commend him for that. And I really wish that more people would say nice things about Spider-Man 3 to him, because I think he kind of let it get to him, and he kind of poo-poos his work on
Yeah.
there too, which is unfortunate because I think he does some great stuff in it. Um,
It definitely doesn't deserve its place as a lot of people put it as one of the worst comic book movies, which is just crazy to me.
yeah, like the last 5 years alone have stuff that is just like
Yeah. The last
brutal to sit through.
the last 2 years alone. But
After January 11th, 2010, when the film was officially canceled by Columbia Pictures and Marvel Studios, they announced that they're rebooting. Avi Arad, Matt Tolmach, and who else is that? Someone Ziskin. The producers in the original trilogy would return, which is often a bad sign for a reboot. If you have the same producers who just
mm,
remake everything again, the X-Men series kind of saw these pitfalls.
yeah.
And they decided to start over a new story with new iterations of the characters, and that they felt that the core story of Spider-Man was that he was about a boy becoming a man, a coming of age story, which is quite literal in the first film. And a bunch of other screenwriters came in and polished up previous iterations of this reboot draft. Director Marc Webb would have won out the director job. Odd choice, I guess. This is kind of the beginning of this Hollywood thing where Hollywood will pluck out like aspiring indie filmmakers and give them like big budgets. And I think that's kind of because they're easier to push around.
Yeah. It's also a marketable thing in a way because didn't Mark Webb do 500 Days of Summer?
Yep.
So I think when they can kind of point to the romance angle and the comedy angle in the same way that they can point to, it's a lot different with Joss Whedon, but they can say, oh, Joss Whedon is really good with ensembles, so we're bringing him into Avengers, and the MCU have done that quite a lot with marketing their director choices.
Yeah, very. I don't know if it always works out, and I think this is an instance
No.
of it not working out so much. And I think it's because, without getting directly into the movie, because there's just a couple more things I want to touch on really quick. Mark Webb's 500 Days of Summer is filled with cast members that have incredible chemistry in ways that maybe the story shouldn't allow. And I don't think he realizes what he's putting on screen. It's a problem I find with Colin Trevorrow as well, or Trevorrow. I'm still
Right.
not sure how to say it. Um,
Yeah.
it leaves a bad taste in my mouth more so than anything from the previous iterations. But Andrew Garfield eventually won out the role of Spider-Man. Other cast member or other actors who were considered for the role were Jamie Bell, Alden Ehrenreich, This is before he blew up recently. Frank Delane,
Interesting.
someone named Ois Habel, I'm not familiar with, Andrew Garfield, and Josh Hutcherson.
Right.
Yeah, eventually Aaron Taylor Johnson, who was just Aaron Johnson at the time, would have been considered for the role, and the late great Anton Yelchin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That would have been something.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are bigger problems than the actors in these movies. That's what I'll say about this, because I'm going to be a little more negative than I usually am on these next two episodes. And Webb stated that he knew Andrew Garfield was the right guy for filming, because when they were filming a scene between him and Gwen Stacy, a scene that's not in the film, they were supposed to be in a diner eating a cheeseburger, and apparently like his mannerisms while he was in this fake diner and eating while like consoling Gwen was supposed to be like something just like old Hollywood style magical.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. I don't get I don't get why that would have like won him over. Like that's it, that's the guy, that's Spider-Man. But
Well,
that's interesting.
What's your general take on Andrew Garfield?
Andrew Garfield is a fantastic actor who is totally misused in these movies and often very bad in them, and it's totally not his fault.
Yeah.
It completely comes down to the writing and the direction. Andrew Garfield is a huge Spider-Man fan.
Yeah.
I think he got done so dirty by these movies, and he has even gone on record as saying, like, as recently when he was promoting Under the Silver Lake for A24, he was saying like it's still a little bit of a sore subject for him, and he's coming to terms with it, and that's really too bad.
Yeah. Is he did you remember the Comic-Con appearance he did?
In Hall H as Spider-Man with all of you guys has always been a dream of mine.
All right.
So thanks for having me. You have no idea how much this means to me.
I remember that really winning me over early on.
I was very like, I don't know if I need another Spider-Man after Spider-Man 3, or at least with someone else, you know? And a lot of my buddies showed me that, and I was like, you know what? Okay, that looks kind of neat. And then saw the movie.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of other production stuff we can get into. Like they felt the responsibility to reinvent Spider-Man, so they wanted to like web shooters again. That's probably the most interesting thing you'll get out of this.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting that Avi Arad follows the Spider-Man villain trajectory in that he's kind of a mentor to Spider-Man, the Spider-Man character, and then ultimately becomes his greatest arch nemesis.
You know, if you're gonna steal cars, don't dress like a car thief.
You a cop?
You seriously think I'm a cop in a skin-tight red and blue suit?
Who are you?
For the movie, The Amazing Spider-Man, The Untold Story, which no one is quite sure what was untold about it, because structurally this is basically the same movie as the 2002 Sam Raimi version.
Yeah, the strangest thing about this movie to me is that they don't change a huge amount, but all the things they change seem to, for the most part, be wrong-headed, and all the things that they replicate seem to be lesser versions of the Raimi Spider-Man movies. It's really bizarre.
I can't comprehend the decisions that were made to get us here, but compared to the sequel, this is like a solid ground at least. When you have a film that knocks it out of the park like the first Spider-Man did in 2002, you have the very tragic circumstance of being like, okay, Hollywood's going to have to follow this up at some point. Tobey Maguire's not going to be Spider-Man forever. You can't do this same movie again or you'll fail. But you can't like just change things to be different or you'll fail. And this film does both of those.
Yeah, the thing is, there were so many options they could have taken. For instance, if they'd followed closer to the Ultimate Spider-Man comic, where a lot of the origins played out slightly differently, and they had Uncle Ben around for several issues to sort of build up his character and then, you know, see him go in a similar way again. There was a lot of different routes they could have taken, yet, again, like you said, the structure is incredibly similar.
I think the one big plot thread is that there's a mystery with Peter Parker's parents. The guy that kills Uncle Ben gets away, and nothing really ends up coming of those. Like even in the standalone movie, there has to be some thematic or like narrative purpose for those things to play out the way they do. Otherwise, why put them in your movie? And we're seeing a lot of that in the blockbusters nowadays, but it's really prevalent in this one.
Yeah, I think the weird the one thing about this movie that I think it kind of introduces that the Raimi movies didn't have, and it didn't mean to introduce this, is a really, really messed up sense of morality. Because the way the small changes they make end up, when you really think about them, make you start questioning whether the characters you're following should be inspirational or heroes at all.
Oh, it's so bad. It's just I guess that's really the breaking point of this movie. Otherwise, it's just kind of like generic trash, whatever, you know. Like I think it's a very pretty looking film. The special effects, I'll even say, like, are really good in this one. There's a really
some of
good
the action is good.
Yeah, there's a really good mix of like practical and VFX stuff. Blockbusters don't look like this still nowadays, like because there's so many big ones. They kind of have to like skimp on stuff once in a while. The poor people in the VFX industry are just so incredibly overworked for so little pay, and it just this one looks really good. I think of a lot of the stuff in the finale on the Oscorp Tower. The action's kind of fun. He moves more like a spider, but it's like it doesn't make sense because he's been Spider-Man for such little time. Like,
Yeah,
I don't understand why they chose that, and he doesn't move like that in the sequel. So like, it's weird. But you're right. The point about the morality, Peter Parker being like kind of a scumbag. You know, like in the Raimi ones, he's just like socially awkward, which is fine. It comes off a little creepy at times, but he's like he doesn't know how to talk to people at the beginning of those films. You know, like that's the point of that. Here, he's just like it changes from scene to scene. Some scenes he's like cool Coldplay listening skater dude. Other scenes he's like young James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. Other scenes he's like social outcast, and it's just which one is it? And poor Andrew Garfield has to like hop between each one of those, trying to like create some connective tissue through his performance, and it's just crazy. I think the scene where it completely lost me was when they were like these bullies were picking on that one kid, right? And then Peter Parker tries to like fight back,
right.
And I was like, "What is? Nothing's gonna come from this, right?" And then I was absolutely correct. Nothing came from that. They just want to make you see that there's Peter Parker's tougher. There's Peter Parker's cooler than Tobey Maguire.
Yeah.
And it's just bizarre. Like nothing leads into anything in this film.
Yeah, it's kind of unclear what they're trying to change small aspects of his character, but not following through on any of those changes, which makes it kind of confusing as to what kind of person he is, other than just a someone who only thinks of himself, really. Which again, like the small things like the that have larger effects, like the fact that he finds out that Uncle Ben's killer is the same man he let go. He finds out immediately and then proceeds to spend a decent amount of the movie finding people who look like him and beating them up violently, and then never finding him. I don't understand what the purpose of that, other than to show that when he's having that argument with Captain Stacy about whether Spider-Man is a vigilante, it makes him look stupid because, well, yeah, he's just attacking people. He's just attacking people who all look the same. And then he's trying to claim that he's a hero and he's trying to do the right thing. And as an audience, you're like, well, no, I mean, in this situation, like the cop is right. You're actually just beating up people.
Yeah, and that's fucking hilarious. Like, I can't understand why that's the route they could have done anything after Spider-Man 3. They could have done anything to restart this universe, and they're just like, the same thing, but make them angrier. And like, you know what? I'm not even opposed to Peter Parker being like almost an anti-hero at first, and realizing like, with the great power comes great responsibility thing, you know. like maybe have that backfire and have Uncle Ben's killer be a supervillain. Like I don't know, maybe that's too far. I don't know. Although I guess they did that in Spider-Man 3 and Spectacular Spider-Man also. So
I this is what I when I came into this the second time, I did honestly try and come in like be a little bit more positive, and it didn't work. But I did. I've been reading a lot of these since I've last seen this movie. I've been reading a lot of the classic Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and various other Spider-Man comics, and there's usually a lot of these stories start with Peter Parker being kind of horrible, being very selfish, but it's the beginning of an arc. You know, there's he will act that way, and he will bad things will happen to him, and he will only focus on how it's affecting him, and he'll be very self-pitying, and he'll take it out on others. And then by the end of that journey, he realizes that it's not all about him, and that he should pay more attention to his friends or his classmates or Aunt May. Whereas in this movie, whenever any tragedy befalls him, it's only about him. He just mopes. He completely ignores Aunt May for the entire movie. But I guess he got her some eggs at the end, so it's all fine.
it's honestly unbelievable. Like I kind of want to pull these writers, like the creative team aside, and be like, "Do you know what you've done?" Like I'm sure they're fine people, but just like the story that they came up with is so like corrupt. I've said it for a couple of years now, and I'll say it again. I think they accidentally wrote Eddie Brock instead of Peter Parker. That's what this really feels like.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost a Eddie Brock or it's or it's Doctor Octopus, really, because of these dark mirrors who have had similar lives to Peter in some respects, had bad things happen to them, but chose to respond to them in selfish ways. Those characters exist to contrast with Peter Parker, who has taken a good route. We're not meant to focus on a Peter Parker who's, again, being selfish.
Yeah, I think another one of the breaking points of the film is that, like I said, I'm totally cool with them starting off this way, and like you said in the original comics, like that selfish Peter Parker. But then the film doesn't address those moments in the second half, and I don't even mean like a literal like, oh, have those characters come back and see how Peter Parker changed, or he treats people differently, which he does, but there's no like middle point to that. It's like you went from point A to point Z, and you're like,
Yeah.
yep, that's an arc. And like you missed every other beat along the way. Like that's not writing. That's bullet points.
Yeah, exactly. And I ended up not minding some of those moments, like when he eventually meets with Flash, and Flash is kind of sympathetic to him, and they sort of become friends, I think. But that kind of stuff worked for me, but it was only because at that point I was so starved for any kind of character growth that I was just like, oh, thanks for this morsel.
Yeah, you know what? No, that I think that's a good moment. But then he's like never in the film again.
Yeah.
So it's like, again, why did you even spend time with these people? Like, I'm not like, I think the Flash character in the Raimi version is not like the peak of like minor character storytelling or anything like that. But, you know, there's a purpose to it. And then when that arc ends, it influences Peter's journey for the next like section of the film where he's like, yeah, I was justified in beating up the bully. Like that was a good thing. And his uncle's like, yo, no, that's a bad idea. And then the next arc of the film plays out like as an evolution of that.
One thing that I think is the saving grace of this movie in some ways is that a lot of individual moments work because of the strength of the actors and their chemistry together. So even when there's these huge failings, I can enjoy a couple of scenes for what they are, on isolated from anything else.
Oh yeah, you know what? Let's get into the cast then really quick.
Yeah.
Andrew Garfield, Peter Parker, Spider-Man. I don't think I know what you think of him too much.
I was always a huge fan of Andrew Garfield for his early career. I haven't seen too much of him lately. I haven't seen Under Silver Lake yet. But I always really liked him, and I thought he was an interesting choice for Peter Parker. It's hard to separate him from the character he plays here in some ways, because I don't know. I don't want to blame him for it, but he is playing a really unlikable version of the character. I think the writing, like you said, fails him, but I don't know if he's putting in his best work either.
Oh, okay. I would say definitely check out Under the Silver Lake, which I only saw just recently. He plays like a version of this character, and I think that was the writer director having fun with his casting, honestly.
Okay.
Because we're not supposed to like him in that movie, and the film is aware of that. So that one's more fun, I think, if you're not a fan of these movies in particular.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem, right, with this movie, is that it keeps insisting we like him when he's not following that arc at all.
Yeah, it's honestly it's a little the problem I have with some of the Zack Snyder movies where they're telling us one thing but they're showing us another. It's very bizarre. But the rest of the cast is just stacked with talent, and it really does remind me of like the X-Men movies where it's like, look at this incredible list of cast members, and they gave them fuck all to do. Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy is charming and bubbly as ever. Emma Stone is just charming and bubbly and wonderful. Rice Ifans as Dr. Kirk Connors the Lizard.
Yeah.
He's like such a talented actor, and then he gets like the dumbest dialogue. Dennis Leary as Captain Stacy. This is my favorite part of the movie, actually. I think Dennis Leary is like amazing in this, and gets like a believable arc, like a perfectly divided 3-part arc. I don't know about the Spider-Man. I'm gonna hunt the Spider-Man. I see the good Spider-Man does, and I gotta help him out. Death, and that lingers over Spider-Man as a character. Perfect, simple, clean. All you need from that. Campbell Scott as Richard Parker, which is like hilarious to me. Irfan Khan as Rajit Ratha. I don't know this character, but Irfan Khan is an incredible actor, and he's given also nothing in this, which is just bizarre to me. Because why?
He's one of the many characters who shows up and then disappears, and you assume will figure into the plot later, and then he just doesn't.
There's because the last time we see him in the official film, it's in the car attack on the bridge, right?
I think so.
Fuck, I just saw this movie again and I forgot.
Yeah.
But there's a deleted scene where I guess he survived that, and he goes to the lizard's underground lair where he also tranquilizes Peter or something like that, and then the lizard kills him in there instead after he tells Peter like he doesn't know like the powers he's messing with or something like that. It's very odd, and it's kind of a like patient zero for the incessant like building of nothing that this franchise had. Like it just constantly like, oh, we'll get to this later. And it's like, what's the point of it now? Oh, trust us, we'll get to it later. And
yeah,
like you never were able to bullshit me, man. I read through this like day one.
It really is a Spider-Man Dawn of Nothing, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's too bad, because then you have Martin Sheen as Ben Parker and Sally Field as May Parker.
Yeah,
this is genius casting.
I think
they did nothing.
I do think Martin Sheen is my favorite part of this movie by a long shot. He gets very little to do, but when he is there, I kind of almost wish that if they were going to introduce a new Uncle Ben, spend more of the time with Uncle Ben before, obviously, tragedy strikes. Because he is really good in this. His scenes with Peter, the way he reacts when at one point Peter calls him a good father, and his reaction, I don't know, there's so much about his performance that's really moving to me. But he's just not really given the time. And the same with Sally Field, really, who has even far less to do.
Oh God, yeah. And then like when they do give her stuff in the next one, it's like, why did you do that? I gotta save that. But
Yeah.
um, and you know what I would have really liked? I don't know if it would have worked, but this would have been like different, and I think could have been interesting to play out. If you don't kill off Uncle Ben, at least in this first one, I like like an alternate universe where Uncle Ben doesn't die, at least off the bat. Like maybe at least hold off to like the very end. You know, Peter has a Spider-Man adventure with everything whole in his life, so to speak. You know, like
I think this is one of those movies as well where they're following certain beats from the Spider-Man mythos without any narrative reason to, in some respects. Like why focus so much on the disappearance and apparent death of his parents if you're then going to go kill off his father figure and focus on that, and then you're going to have the tragic death of Captain Stacy and have that potentially affect him as well. These all these things you could have just they could have made it focus more on his parents and how their disappearance from his life, how that affects him. But they're just trying to do all these things at once. They're just, and it obviously we won't go into it now, but it goes off into Gwen Stacy in the second one, where it's just you're ticking a box because that's what happens to that character.
oh God, it's really bad in these movies. Some other superhero movies and comic book movies do that. Like, well, it happened in the source material. And it's like, you know, I love the Harry Potter movies, but even the last Harry Potter movie does that. It's like, well, these characters died off screen in the book. And it's like, no, it's a movie. What
Yeah.
the fuck? You don't have to do the same thing.
Yeah,
No.
exactly.
It's more heartbreaking and frustrating than like, you know, I mean, it is a little maddening, but, you know, it just, we know the potential of these stories. And even the people who worked on these knew the potential of these stories because they were involved with the last three, the really
Yeah.
good ones. Um, I think one of the most unfortunate things too is that I think we've just made very good points about like yeah like keep the parents around and keep the parent arc, but then it's like oh yeah we just did that in the 2002 one also like I have a father, his name was Ben Parker, and it's like well even if we just did everything we just talked about, keep Uncle Ben around, have it be about like the lack of parents in his life for him to realize like I do have parents in my life. It's like oh shoot that's still the same fucking arc. So like, so like they really were just like they screwed the pooch by having it be an origin story. I think that was the big misstep. Don't do the origin. You know, like I mean, not that Marvel's also a gold standard for storytelling, but like I think they were smart enough not to do that again because they were interested in a story that wasn't about Peter Parker like having to relive stuff we've already seen. And you know what?
Yeah.
I'm even gonna go as far as saying that it's not even about what the audience needs; it's about what the character needs for their iteration. Um, and apart from like issues people may or may not have with certain aspects of Homecoming, I think for that iteration of the character, that's a pretty good jumping off point. And here, I don't think this ever feels like all right. Let's go on the next adventure with Spider-Man, or even on its own terms. Like this is what this whole story was about. Because at the end of the film, I don't know what the Amazing Spider-Man is actually about. I don't know what the Untold Story is. I don't know what thematically we're following through. I don't know what Peter learns by the end of it, or even if he doesn't learn, even if he makes mistakes, nothing but mistakes in this film. I think that could be super interesting. I just don't know what it's all about.
Yeah, I think in a way, this movie, one of the more frustrating things about this movie is that it feels like a series of business decisions. It feels really cynical. It feels like they've got a list of things they want to include in the movie, and you have to include these things. And maybe we'll have this variation. Okay, this time when he's discovering his powers, we'll play Coldplay and he'll do kickflips because that's this version. But there's no actual like. It doesn't feel like a movie that has a creative purpose behind it, even other than maybe as a vehicle for Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone being like an on-screen couple that works.
And they would also work in real life for many years. And
Yeah,
again, I think that's one of the highlights of the film. They're very good together. when they're given just some of the worst romance dialogue ever. Like Uncle Ben at one point tells him like, "Oh, you got a picture of you on her computer," and then she's like wowed by that, and it's
Yeah.
just like so degrading.
Also,
I don't
also
understand.
when he completely ruins her family dinner and then goes outside, reveals he's Spider-Man and immediately kisses her before she has time to react to it at all. But she loves it apparently. But again, it's like you almost kind of want to let it go a little bit with their scenes together because they are so good. They have that chemistry.
Oh God, they're so good, and I would pay to see like. Oh well, I guess I don't know. Maybe it'll be awkward if they work together now. I hope they have a good working relationship because this is my pitch. I want to see like romantic comedy with them if they're cool with working together or whatever. You know, I don't know their terms or whatever, but they're so good together, and
Yeah.
they got wasted on this nonsense, this frustrating
Yeah. I think
thing.
I also, as you were saying about Captain Stacy, even though Gwen's reactions to things are a little strange at times, every single scene she's in, I love her in it. So I do like her character a lot in this, and I like that she has agency in the ending of the movie. There's a purpose to her being there, and it's not shoehorned in.
Yeah, like it makes sense for like plot reasons, you know, like that. At the very least, there's like something connecting to all of that, and in this movie, that's like an oasis in the desert. um, of like good material, I guess. I mean, maybe good's a little too nice. I'll say it's like the bare minimum of this.
Yeah,
And what do you think about the James Horner score?
I quite like the score on this one, which is a shame when it's interrupted by the soundtrack, which I think is really jarring most of the time, and detracts from it. The score, the score I'm a fan of,
Okay.
although not. I wouldn't say it's memorable, but it is something that worked enough for me.
Yeah, I love James Horner, and I mean no disrespect to the Gone, but I'm not a fan of this. Even like opening weekend, I remember getting dragged to this, and a friend of mine was like, "No, I saw it. It's good. It's good." And I was like, "Okay." And then I heard like the tribal drum beats and like the operatic like humming, and I was like, "What is happening?" So I'm sorry, James Horner. I still love you. You gave me the Alien score, which is untouchable.
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to track that sometimes when there's a big build in the score towards a big moment, but I'm not connecting to the moment. And so sometimes I can find it hard to tell whether the score is falling flat or it's just the actual material isn't matching up to it.
I think that'll lead me to the last character I want to talk about really quick. We didn't talk about the villain, the lizard.
Oh,
He's big and falls flat. Uh, I will say really quick, and then I'll toss it back to you. I'm not crazy about the design, but I think it almost gets there. I think what ruins it is the face. The face sucks, and apparently even Mark Webb was like saying how the motion capture on the face was like really challenging to deal with during the post production process. And I believe him because I think it looks bad. The lizard itself is fine until the face. You know, like if you saw a silhouette of it from the back, you'd be like, oh, the lizard looks awesome. And then you see the movie and you're like, oh shit, that's really bad. And I don't quite understand why they didn't just make him a lizard looking man instead of a man looking lizard.
he looks like one of the Goombas from the Super Mario Bros. Movie, doesn't he?
Oh shit, he does.
he's got such a goofy face. I really hated it when I first saw it. This time I liked it a bit more, but I think it completely falls apart as soon as he starts speaking. When you see that face move and words come out of it, it is the most strange thing. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion. It's awful.
It's the weirdest thing, and like I really think they missed an opportunity. Like this would have just like fired off the neurons in the caveman part of my brain if they had him wear the lab suit, you know, like the lab coat while he's running around. Like, it's how do you not do that with the lizard? Like, that's just a cool image, you know. But I guess
there's even a part where he's wearing a lab coat and he kind of like he's wearing it for like half a second. He looks at it and then just pulls it off as if like, here you go, the lab coat's here, but we're skipping it.
Oh, I hate that. I hated that so much. And I guess the whole thing was that, they wanted to do the Batman Begins of the Spider-Man films.
Right.
And you heard that a lot in the late 2000s, early 2010s. We want to do Batman Begins so we can do The Dark Knight. The problem with that is that not everyone's Christopher Nolan, and not every character needs to be Batman.
Here's a crazy off-topic question, but it's just popped into my head. Is the Sonic movie trying to be the Batman Begins of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise?
So they can do the Dark Knight of Sonic?
Yeah, which I guess is Shadow the Hedgehog.
Well, no, obviously the Dark Knight of Sonic games is Sonic Adventure Battle 2.
Attention all units. Suspect seen heading south. Block all major roads and capture the suspect.
Not much better implementation of the facial structure on Sonic than the lizard, honestly. Like, the lizard looks better overall, but the face, it's the fucking face, man. It doesn't work.
Well, I think I don't know if I'd be extra unfair to Lizard, because when I was growing up reading comics with Lizard in, or watching the 90s Spider-Man cartoon with the Lizard in, I always liked him as a character and had ideas of how I wanted him to appear in. I remember I was convinced I really wanted him to be in Spider-Man 4 after they'd set him up, Kurt Connors up throughout all three of those movies. And I always thought he'd be a good implementation to have this character who Peter Parker is connected with, who he is forced to fight because even though he knows they're a good person, they've turned into this uncontrollable monster. And that's a really good dynamic. And I do think that making his character effectively be, and then he goes crazy and wants to turn everyone into a lizard, does not work and skips over any potential like character drama that could have been between them.
Yeah, I mean, by that point, the film's like unsalvageable, but that really pushes it over the edge where you're like, what? Like, I mean, when Peter's investigating, sorry, we're not really talking about the plot of this movie because like we're hopping around as much as the movie does here. Okay, so
yeah.
But when Peter's investigating after the lizard attack and he follows him through the sewers, also this was brought up to me recently by a friend of the show, Jillian Miles. The lizard crawls out of a toilet. Like, plumbing doesn't work that way. But whatever. The lizard has, like, in his underground lab in the sewers, like, a plan to irradiate the city to turn everyone into lizard people. But that is never established in, like, the mentality of the villain. And then you're right, the whole well, he's just crazy excuse, like, doesn't, like, where do people get this from? I don't ever know of an instance where that, like, worked. I've heard people say that about the Joker, like, oh, well, the Joker's cool because he's just crazy. And it's like, no, there's like a methodology to the writing of that character, at least. You can't just have them do things and use that as an excuse. And you know what really pisses me off about the third act, though? This is like the least of the film's problems in hindsight, but this one really irks me. When the lizard does start spraying everyone with, like, the lizard smoke, and, like, everyone's starting to turn into things, you see the SWAT team turn into, like, lizard people, I was like, okay, that's fucking cool. Spider-Man's gonna have to fight his way through a bunch of mini lizards to go up against the big lizard. All right, here we go. And they never come back to them.
Yeah.
Until they're losing the lizard thing when the serum is shot through the sky and everyone turns back to normal. That pissed me off so much, and it still irks me.
It's so strange because it was the scene where he transforms them could be lifted out, and there's not really a point to it. other than to potentially transform them, which is not paid off at all. It's almost like that's part of a draft where there was going to be a fight and they chose not to film that part. It's really strange.
It's yeah. This whole movie works like that, though. In hindsight, also like, oh, there's this thing. This might be an interesting idea, and then it's never brought up again. It doesn't influence anything beyond like the moment that we just witnessed. And I remember there was even like a Lego set that made the round. People were like, oh, there's gonna be a bunch of lizards at some point in the movie, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. So when I saw that realized, I was like, yeah, and then just nothing. The visceral disappointment in my body, I'll never forget in the theater. I was like, I was ready to walk out. And I know that's not even close to the biggest problem this movie has, but when you set up something that goofy and cool in a Spider-Man movie and you don't follow through, you don't get Spider-Man.
Yeah,
It's
I think they're kind of caught in between, like wanting to do some of this goofier stuff, like a villain who wants to turn everyone into lizard people, but then they also want to be kind of grounded in a bit darker and grittier. But they're not really committing to either side of that, and it ends up falling in between.
yeah, and then now people don't even really remember these movies. I got one more to talk about later, so I don't even know why I'm talking about this like it's wrapping up, because it really is. Like, the movie made, I believe, $750 million on like a $230 million budget, which is very good. But it's not like after Spider-Man 3, that's not exactly what it's the least high grossing at the time of release, and that's not what you want for your universe kicker offer, I guess.
Especially when he's one of the most popular superheroes in the world.
Yeah, I think this one really is what started the downhill like tenure of Spider-Man. Because not just from the movie, like Spider-Man's the Marvel superhero in a lot of ways, you know? And for a while he's not going to be, because of the Marvel stuff and Iron Man and Captain America. People really like those because of the movies, you know? And Matt and I talked about it before, that like Spider-Man will last longer because he'll just outlast the MCU, because there's no way the MCU is going to keep going like forever. At least not like in terms of quality, you know, like it's just impossible. That's nothing against that particular. Like, that's just not how production studios work. It's just you can't win all the time, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But Spider-Man is just like a character that a lot of people have this connection to, because he's the most human in a lot of ways, like his struggles, at least his conflicts. And this film, I think, misses all of that. I guess what I'm saying is that by the end of this movie, there's no real human element to these characters, the filmmaking. There might be human moments in the performances, and I think that's what I think we've also like come away with as positives. The acting is very good in this movie.
Yeah.
There's a moment I do really like when Captain Stacy helps Peter Parker. That plays a little weird. The soundtrack gets a little weird there for me. The score gets a little weird, where it's like kind of triumphant, and the lizard stabs Captain Stacy, and it's like it's still going all triumphant and goofy, and I'm like, this is tonally just weird. But then when Kurt Connor saves him with his arm, I was like, this is good. Okay, let's end this on a positive note. And then he goes over to check on Captain Stacy, and he says like, leave Gwen out of it. Like, promise me. He has to promise this dying man that he'll keep doing what he's doing, but he has to leave, at the time, the love of his life out of it. That's a really powerful moment, and all he can do is just scream. There's that great image of him like surrounded by like the falling like flakes, I guess, of the cure or whatever. I don't know what it is, but it looks really cool. I like that image a lot.
Yeah.
And then they basically just do the same end as the first Spider-Man. I'm like, okay, whatever. It's fine. That was good. And then the movie keeps going. And then Peter sits behind her in class. And then when he's breaking a promise to a dying man.
Don't make promises you can't keep, Mr. Parker.
Yeah, but those are the best kind.
Okay, class, open your books.
And the movie ends on a triumphant final swing.
I think, yeah, the ending of this, I think a lot of this movie ends up falling into this very forgettable territory, but then it just ends on that, which is the worst taste to have in your mouth when you come away from a movie. Because they, again, like you said, they do practically the same ending as the first Raimi Spider-Man, right? But well, I mean, actually, you know what? I think it's kind of screwed from the start because Captain Stacy tells him, right, to what was the exact phrase? He says to leave her out of it, to leave Gwen out of it, because people are going to be after him, and it's a dangerous life. That kind of fits with him after living a life where she didn't know whether he was going to come home or not every night. Peter makes that promise, but he didn't say immediately stop speaking to my daughter when she's grieving. Don't turn up to my funeral. Like, refuse to support her emotionally in any way. So he's just like, the way he treats Gwen in that immediate aftermath is really awful, but he's just sat inside moping while she's suffering. And then he just breaks the promise anyway. And like you said, that last moment is played up like this really kind of kooky, charming, like triumphant moment. And yet you're like, well, you only made that. That was like 5 minutes ago in movie time that you made the promise to a dying man, and now you're going back on it. And that's what we're left with you as a character. And it was something they had to like. I remember when I watched it as well and saying that to people, and a lot of people I felt kept saying, "Don't worry, he'll realize that's a bad idea in the next movie." Which just, I don't think that's a valid way of excusing it.
Yeah, no, I people still say that about certain movies that I have feelings about, and I'm like, well, I don't care then. Like that's regardless of what movie genre, what film, what story. If I'm not opposed to cliffhangers. I want to make that clear too. I don't think you are either, right? Like we're pretty open to stuff like that. It's just
yeah,
like you can't end on characters saying like these flawed like thematic statements when the film doesn't support them in any way. Like, I mean, I think the Raimi and his team on the first Spider-Man, and I tried not to bring them up during this, but it's kind of hard not to because this film is so similar. I think they were smart enough to realize that like the end of the first Spider-Man, when they were making it and when they followed it up, is a flawed testament for a character like that. Inherently so, like it's wrong for him to shut people out. The Spider-Man 2 is all about him like kind of recuperating from that decision, and like his life is worse for it. His life becomes better when he lets people in. And the end of the first Spider-Man, it's that great final swing that's like that really is kind of iconic now. But he's alone in that, and the music is like swelling, but it's not like soaring, so to speak. Like it's a very melancholy ending, and here they're just like, no, it was awesome. See you next time. It's like what. There's also a mid-credit scene where Connors is in that prison cell, and a man comes out of the shadows to ask if Peter knows the truth about his parents, and then he tells him, "Leave Peter alone," and the man disappears. And to this day, none of us know what that was about.
Yeah, that iconic character. I think he might turn up in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, actually, but I don't think
that's right.
I don't think he does. I think I don't know. He turns up and he's just a guy called, I don't know. He's just some Oscorp guy, I guess. Again, you can see how on paper they wanted to, at least, the MCU, they'll have this broad plan and they'll fill in the gaps later. They didn't have Nick Fury come in Shadow. They didn't make up a new character to come in and say a vague statement about nothing and then disappear. That's not a tease. That's just confusing. So I still obviously the Amazing Spider-Man 2 has its own problems with this world building stuff, but just seeing it here, the fact that I completely forgot about this post-credit scene until I watched this again, I think is really telling.
It's atrocious. I'm not someone who's crazy about post-credit scenes anymore anyways. They've kind of worn out for me, and that's kind of on me. I'd argue that's kind of also on a lot of the people making them. This one's like bottom 5, though. This is like, it's just so bad. And the actor who plays the mysterious man in shadows is named Michael Maz, who is a really fun character actor. He was in The Crow. He was in a season of 24. Really talented guy. Also given nothing in this. Very par for the course. Director Marc Webb said initially that he left it intentionally mysterious to invite speculation. It's like, no, you guys didn't know, and that's okay. You know, just don't lie to me. Eventually, the character was supposed to be Mr. Fears, Gustav Fears, the gentleman.
Wait, Mr. Fear? Did you say?
Not Mr. Fear, the gentleman.
Oh, okay.
Whose real name is Mr. Fears or Fires. I don't know how to pronounce it, but.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is that from anything, or is that
his first appearance was in 1999, Spider-Man: The Gathering of the Sinister Six. So,
right?
In case you were curious about where they intended to go down the line.
Well, pulling from the best decade of comics, clearly.
Oh yeah, no. I should probably say this for the Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I don't care. The original plan for Spider-Man 3 was apparently they wanted to do the Clone Saga.
What, the Amazing Spider-Man 3 was going to do Clone Saga?
Yep.
I mean, that's kind of shocking, but also not shocking at the same time.
It's like, yeah, that's par for the course for these.
Oh god, I mean, there's a lot of comic book fans out there who I think are satisfied by just seeing the things that they read on screen, but even they wouldn't be satisfied by that because everyone hates the Clone Saga.
People like Ben Reilly a lot, though. I have nothing against him, but like also I don't want to get to there.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Yeah, like I think that's the perfect way to do it. Yeah, like, oh, this cool stuff could have happened, but no, it's not worth it. Oh my god, that's the soundbite I'm going to use for like all of this now.
38 of New York's finest versus one guy in a unitard.
If you want the truth, Peter, come and get it.
I am issuing an arrest warrant for the masked vigilante known as Spider-Man.
I'm in trouble.
The Amazing Spider-Man. Jack, do you have anything else you'd like to add about this film?
No, I think before I watched it, I struggled to remember it, and after watching it only a few days ago, I'm struggling to remember it again. Which I think is maybe one of the meanest things I can say about a movie. There are a few like glimmers of something good in there, but most of all, the actors deserved better material to work with for sure.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest missed opportunities in movies. If it had to exist, this is like the worst form of it, which is too bad. A lot of talent in front and behind the camera never comes together for more than like a shining moment, I'll even say, because I do think there's some really fun stuff in it once in a while. Most of it is bad. Oh, I didn't say anything about the suit. The suit sucks. There you go.
Yeah. I wish I had a more complicated opinion on it, but no, it just sucks.
Yeah, no, it looks like basketball leather thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how like he would have afforded that. Like the Raimi one, I kind of get more because it's like whimsical fantasy New York. This one is like grounded and real, but also he's gonna make his own Spider-Man suit with basketball material. I don't know. It's bad. That's the bummer. I like the next one though. You'll hear me say some nice things about that suit.
Yeah. yeah, for sure. The next one is amazing.
Yeah, haha, haha, amazing. It is amazing too. Spider-Man. Yeah, this movie sucks. I'm sorry. I hope I said some constructive things here. I don't want to just be a nerd who like rants online. But this is a bad movie, and I'm still kind of flabbergasted that people tried to convince me it was good for a while. So
yeah,
haha, I won. You lost. Jack, thank you so much for joining me. If you don't have anything else to say about this, I can't imagine why anyone would. But where can the people find you online?
Well, I'm on Twitter. My username is jalexg_. You can find a bunch of my stuff on there. I write for a few places that you find on there, but also in terms of Spider-Man stuff, I run a podcast called That 90s Spider-Man Show, where me and my friend Henry, we go through every episode of the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, as well as some extra side stuff. And we go into some of the comic book origins and that kind of stuff as well, if you want to see that kind of stuff. In addition to that, I also run a Twitter page, which is No Context Spider-Man, where I just get really strange panels from classic Spider-Man comics that are really confusing. So if you want to laugh at something for 10 minutes, then head over to that as well.
Links down to that below. Thank you so much, Jack, for coming in and helping out with this episode. God, I'm so sorry you had to sit through this.
You're forgiven.
Thank you. So that's it for The Amazing Spider-Man. Next up, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, where I have something a little different in mind. It might work, it might not. It might be the biggest disaster this side of the actual film. But who knows? You'll have to come and check it out next time. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. If you didn't like this episode, like and subscribe anyways, because you might find something you do like. Check us out on Patreon, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Spotify. We have been professionally unprofessional.